He felt the sting in his chest first, and that encourages me when I hurt.
In 1944, Corrie ten Boom, a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, considered the full measure of God's participation in the suffering of humanity. While clinging to life in the shadow of ultimate evil, she concluded, "There is no pit so deep that the love of God is not deeper still."
There's a famous passage in Elie Wiesel's book, Night, where he recalls being in a concentration camp and seeing a line of people being hanged, and a little boy is one of the people being hanged, and he's so light that he doesn't die immediately because his neck doesn't break, and he's dangling there half dead and half alive, and the crowd are being forced to watch this, and somebody suddenly says, "Where is God? Where is God?" And somebody else says, "There he is, he's hanging from that noose."
That's the answer to the question that's often asked: where was God in Auschwitz? Where was God in Darfur? He was there. He was in the gas chambers. Yes, the incarnation means that he descends into the whole of the human condition.
God is there at the heart of the mess and taking the worst onto himself. That's what we believe when we think about Jesus, and that's why ultimately we have hope.
It makes me feel there's a certain kind of kinship, that God gets it, that God understands. He's been there. He doesn't just have the facts straight. That's omniscience. He has entered into the experience of it, and that's something entirely different.
He knows exactly how I feel. There is no pain that I'm going through paralyzed. He was even paralyzed on the cross. That tells me he identifies, and that, for me, is enough.
The Christian response to the problem of evil and suffering was perhaps best summarized by the Apostle Paul. 2 decades after Jesus' death and resurrection, Paul described the persecution Christians endured and the hope that sustained them as they preached the gospel throughout the first-century Roman world.
We are afflicted in every way but not crushed, perplexed but not despairing, persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed. Therefore, we do not lose heart, but though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. For momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison.
He refers to these things as momentary light affliction. What, Paul, are you crazy? Momentary light affliction? Well, we understand when we read further, because he goes on to explain that these are momentary light afflictions in comparison to something else, because these afflictions, and he's very particular about his words, are producing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. And you see, there's this subtle theme through the New Testament that helps us understand this problem of evil as followers of Christ. That God can cause all these things to work for good in our lives because we love Him, we're called according to His purpose. And these have a transforming impact on us so that when we get to heaven, we are actually different people than we would have been if we had not gone through these things. These momentary light afflictions are producing for us the eternal weight of glory.
If you only lived this life 80 and then you died and that was the end of it, the kind of hostilities and hurts that we have in this life would be writ large. Their significance would be stunning indeed. But from the vantage point of life forever with God in heaven, the harms and hurts that happen to us in this life, though still real and still important, are shown to be so insignificant compared to the glories and the joys we're going to experience in the afterlife, that from the vantage point of that perspective, they are well worth it.
In 1998, I was at a conference and met a young man named Mark Herringer. Mark was from Boston, and we became good friends. One night we were driving to the airport, and he told me about a tragedy that his family had suffered 5 years earlier. I'll never forget Mark's story because it demonstrated so powerfully the importance of what the hope of heaven can really mean.
It was January 16th of 1993. In Boston, it snows a lot, and so you're shoveling your driveway constantly. We had gone to the supermarket that morning, and while we were at the supermarket, it was actually snowing. So I got home kind of irritated and said, honey, why don't you park the car out in the street here? I'll just clean off the driveway. And our two kids were with us, our son, 3 years old, and our daughter, Lauren, who was 18 months old. I jumped out of the car, got a shovel, the kids jumped out with me, and I asked my wife to move the car to a easier spot for us to clean out the driveway, and she did, and she said, make sure you keep an eye on the kids. And my son immediately went with her into the car, and my daughter was with me for a few moments. But what I hadn't realized was that she actually wanted to be in the car also. And so as my daughter was running to the car, she was trapped under the front wheel of the car. There was a brief scream of pain, and I immediately ran out, and to any parent's horror, they see their 18-month-old daughter under the front wheel of a 2,000-pound car was overwhelming. She died instantly, as we found out later. I actually took the last breath that she ever breathed on this earth out of her lungs. And we drove to the emergency room at the hospital, hoping and praying that things might be different, but they weren't. And within an hour or so, they had pronounced her dead. I was very angry at God. I didn't know why he would choose me. And my mind would race and think, what is this all about? Where am I going? What does this all mean? Do I take my life? Do I go through a divorce? We had a 97% failure rate within the first 2 years when there's a death of a child and the parental involvement. What would that mean? Would that bring some closure to that? What would be a life of anger and despair at God? Those options are not good ends. The struggle during our pain here was I had to make a decision. Am I going to accept or reject this situation that I'm in based on not knowing the end game, or not knowing all the answers? I was given a Bible, my very first Bible, on Christmas 3 weeks before the accident. And that Bible was to become the thing that kept me alive. There were drugs and various things that people gave us to try to calm us down during this difficult few weeks, but it was actually holding the Bible and reading it was the thing that actually comforted me the most. I actually slept with my Bible for about 9 months every night. What I was struggling for was the reality of Jesus, the reality of somebody who knew suffering, who was going to be there, who had experienced this himself. I spent a lot of time actually in cemeteries just walking around and found some comfort there. I could oftentimes connect more closely with pain there because I knew that everybody there had a story and that people had come and grieved there. It gave me a clarity that Jesus works powerfully in places where people are hurting. And so I found great comfort to just be quiet and listen to him there. And so sometimes I would just go around and read the stone markers and pray for the various families. And it actually turned from an internal thing where I was trying to get healing and hope to a place where I would actually intercede for others. And that was a shift that occurred where God began to do a work that my healing was going to be more complete in helping others. We had 5 neighbors who lived next to us, directly next to us when the accident happened. And within 5 years, 3 whole families of those households came to know Christ personally. And when I think back on where we were and how God used that, I said, that doesn't make it all right. That doesn't make it good. That doesn't make my pain go away. But it does tell me that God is bringing some good out of this, that there'll be some eternal good that comes out of her life and death. Your answer at this tough time is you are naked, you are stripped down raw. You have to make a decision. Which road are you going to take? Where are you going to go in your faith? And I think evil and suffering drive us to those points where we have to make those naked decisions. We have to make those raw decisions that give us nowhere out, nothing to hold on to. We're just there before Him. And that's what real faith, I think, is. Not knowing the future, but understanding enough now to make a decision that will change the future in our lives. If I look at it,